There are two kinds of silence in this world: the silence of those who have nothing left to say, and the silence of those who know that speaking the truth will cost them everything. This is a story about a woman who chose the second kind. Her name was Rosa. She scrubbed the marble floors of a glass mansion every morning before sunrise. She folded the silk sheets. She polished the silver. She made herself invisible because that was her job, to exist without being seen. But then she became pregnant, and the people who employed her, the wealthy couple who lived in that beautiful house on the hill, they demanded to know, who is the father? She refused to answer, not because she was ashamed, not because she was protecting some secret lover, but because the truth was more dangerous than any lie she could tell. So they punished her. They interrogated her. They threatened her with legal action, with poverty, with destruction. And when she still wouldn't speak, they threw her out into the street with nothing but the clothes on her back and the child growing inside her. They thought her silence made her weak. They thought her poverty made her powerless. They thought they could erase her and move on with their perfect lives. But they forgot something. They forgot that eventually, the truth doesn't need permission to speak. It speaks itself, written in DNA, proven in numbers, undeniable and absolute. And when it did, their glass house shattered. This is a story about power and powerlessness, about cruelty and courage, about a woman who lost everything except her dignity, and the people who had everything except the one thing that mattered. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever wondered whether goodness can survive in a world that rewards the ruthless, then this story is for you. Because sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one telling the only truth that matters. And that truth will set you free, even if it destroys everything else. There is a house made of glass and silence. It rises from the hillside like a monument to everything money can buy. And every morning, long before the sun touches its gleaming walls, a woman enters through the servant's door to make it perfect. Her name doesn't matter to the people who live there. To them, she is the uniform she wears, the hands that fold their linens, the shadow that moves through their rooms while they sleep. She is 42 years old. She has worked in this house for 7 years, and she knows every secret it holds, though she has never been invited to speak a single one aloud. The marble is cold beneath her knees as she scrubs. Always cold, no matter the season. The wife prefers it this way, pristine, reflective, like the surface of a frozen lake. The maid has learned to move quietly, to breathe shallowly, to exist without disturbing the carefully constructed stillness of wealth. She remembers the first time the husband watched her work. Not in passing, not with the casual indifference of someone who employs but does not see. He watched with intention. He lingered in doorways. He asked questions about her life that seemed kind until she understood they were not questions at all, but permissions he was granting himself. That was months ago, before the night he came to her small room at the back of the house, before the whispered words that were not apologies, but warnings, before the moment when her body stopped being hers alone. Now, as she polishes the silver coffee service, a wave of nausea rises so suddenly she must grip the edge of the table. The room tilts. The gleaming surface of the tray reflects her face, distorted and unfamiliar. Something inside her has begun to change, and she knows, with the certainty of a woman who has already lost too much, that this knowledge will cost her everything. The uniform no longer fits the way it should. She can feel it in the morning when she fastens the buttons, the fabric pulling tight across her abdomen in a way that makes her stomach clench with fear. She has let out the seams twice already, working by candlelight in her tiny room, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who understands that survival is measured in millimeters. The mirror tells her what she already knows. Her face looks thinner, drawn, but her body is betraying her in ways she cannot hide much longer. She wraps herself in layers, a cardigan over the uniform, though the house is warm, an apron tied higher than necessary, small acts of camouflage that will not hold. In the kitchen, she moves through her tasks with mechanical efficiency. Breakfast for 2. Coffee exactly 175 degrees. Toast cut diagonally. Orange juice freshly squeezed. The rituals of wealth are precise, unforgiving. She has memorized them all. But today, the wife is watching. Not obviously, not with the crude directness of accusation. The wife is too refined for that. She watches the way ice watches, present, patient, waiting for the right moment to crack through. The maid feels those eyes on her waist, her movements, the way she turns sideways to fit through spaces that used to accommodate her easily. The silence between them grows heavy, textured with suspicion. When the wife finally speaks, her voice is soft, almost tender. This is how cruelty often begins in houses like this, racked in the language of concern. "Are you feeling well?" 4 words, each one a trap. The maid looks up from the silver she is polishing, meets the wife's gaze for only a moment before lowering her eyes in the way that is expected of her. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for asking." The lie tastes like copper in her mouth. But lies, she has learned, are sometimes the only protection the powerless have. The confrontation comes on a Tuesday morning, in the sunroom where light falls through floor-to-ceiling windows and turns everything translucent. There is nowhere to hide in this room. That is why the wife has chosen it. "Sit down." The maid remains standing. Sitting would suggest equality, and they both know that is not what this conversation is about. "I asked you to sit." The voice is harder now, stripped of its earlier softness. The maid lowers herself onto the edge of a chair that costs more than 6 months of her salary. Her spine stays rigid. Her hands fold in her lap. She has learned to make herself small, but she has not yet learned to disappear entirely. "You're pregnant." It is not a question. The wife states it as fact, as if she has already conducted her investigation, gathered her evidence, reached her verdict. The maid's silence is a kind of answer. "How far along?" 5 months. The truth comes out before she can stop it. There is a strange relief in naming it, in allowing the secret to take up space in the bright, terrible light of this room. The wife's expression doesn't change. She has mastered the art of containing emotion, of turning feeling into strategy. But her hands tighten on the arms of her chair, and the maid sees it. The first hairline fracture in the porcelain composure. "Who is the father?" The question hangs in the air like a blade. The maid looks up and sees him then, standing in the doorway. The husband. He is perfectly still, his face carefully blank, his expensive suit immaculate. He has heard the question. He knows the answer. And he says nothing. Their eyes meet for half a second. In that moment, she sees everything. His fear, his cowardice, his desperate hope that she will protect him the way he has never protected her. She looks away first. "I asked you a question." The wife's voice cuts through the silence. The maid's throat feels tight, her heart a fist beating against her ribs. She thinks of the child growing inside her, the small life that has already become more real to her than anything in this cold, beautiful house. She thinks of what truth will cost. She thinks of what lies might save. I can't say. Can't or won't? The distinction matters, though the maid cannot explain why. Can't suggests impossibility, something beyond her control. Won't suggests choice, defiance, a claim to agency she is not supposed to possess. Won't, she whispers. The word is barely audible, but it lands like thunder. The wife rises from her chair with the fluid grace of someone who has never had to worry about being heard. She crosses the space between them in 3 measured steps and stands over the maid, her shadow falling across the smaller woman's body like a prophecy. If you don't answer, I will assume the worst. The maid keeps her eyes on her hands, on the rough skin of her knuckles, the short nails, the evidence of years spent scrubbing away other people's dirt. She knows what the worst means. She knows what assumptions will be made, what stories will be told, how quickly her silence will be shaped into guilt. But she also knows what the truth would do. Not just to her, but to the child. The baby would be born into a war she did not start, claimed by people who would use her as a weapon, raised in the shadow of a betrayal that would define her before she could speak her first word. Silence, she decides, is not surrender. It is protection. It is the only power she has left. Then assume what you will, she says quietly. The wife's hand moves so fast the maid doesn't see it coming. The slap is not hard. Violence in houses like this is always measured, controlled. But the shock of it reverberates through her entire body. Her cheek burns. Her eyes water. She does not raise her hand to touch the place where she has been struck. The husband is still in the doorway, still watching, still silent. The wife leans close, her breath hot against the maid's ear. You have one chance to explain yourself. One chance to tell me the truth before I make this uglier than it needs to be. The maid can feel the child moving inside her now, a small flutter against her ribs. She places her hand over her stomach, a gesture of protection, of promise. I have nothing to explain, she says, and for the first time in 7 years of service, of obedience, of making herself invisible, she meets the wife's gaze and holds it. The wife steps back as if she has been struck. In the doorway, the husband finally moves. He turns. He walks away. The sound of his footsteps on the marble floor grows fainter, fainter, until there is only silence again. And in that silence, the maid understands. The worst is only beginning. The pregnancy becomes a crime she is expected to confess. The wife circles her like a prosecutor, asking the same questions in different arrangements, setting traps with kindness and then springing them with cruelty. Each day the interrogations grow longer, more pointed, more designed to break her. Was it someone from the neighborhood? A delivery man? The gardener? The maid shakes her head to each suggestion, her silence becoming a wall the wife cannot scale. Then it must be someone you're protecting, someone who matters to you. The maid says nothing. Let the wife believe it is love that keeps her quiet, not fear. Let her build whatever story makes sense in a world where the powerful cannot imagine their own guilt. The husband has become a ghost in his own home. He leaves early, returns late, avoids rooms where the 2 women might be. But the maid sees him watching from windows, hovering near doorways, his face pale and drawn. He has lost weight. There are shadows under his eyes that no amount of sleep can erase. One morning, she finds him alone in the library, holding a small wooden cross she had left on her bedside table months ago. He must have gone into her room, searched through her belongings. The intimacy of the violation makes her stomach turn. He looks up when she enters, and for a moment she thinks he will speak, will confess, will claim the child and end this charade. Instead, he places the cross carefully on the table between them and walks out without a word. Cowardice, she understands, is its own kind of violence. The wife's campaign intensifies. She begins to speak of the maid's pregnancy as a moral failure, a stain on the household, an embarrassment that must be managed. She uses words like irresponsible and shameful and disgraceful, each one carefully chosen to reduce the maid from a person to a problem that needs solving. "You understand this reflects poorly on all of us," the wife says one afternoon, her voice measured and reasonable, as if they are discussing a broken vase rather than a human life. "We have a reputation to maintain. Our friends, our business associates, they will ask questions." The maid continues folding laundry, her hands moving with steady precision. She will not give the wife the satisfaction of seeing her shake. "I'm offering you a way out of this," the wife continues. "Tell me it was someone insignificant, someone who doesn't matter, a stranger, perhaps, someone passing through. We can craft a story that protects you, that allows you to keep your dignity." The maid understands what is being offered, a lie in exchange for survival, a false confession that would absolve everyone except her. She would become the tragic figure, the foolish woman seduced and abandoned, and the house would remain unstained. "No," she says quietly. The wife's composure cracks, just for an instant. Her voice rises, sharp and brittle. "You ungrateful girl! Do you understand what I'm trying to do for you? I'm trying to help you, but you insist on making this impossible." The maid meets her eyes. "I don't need that kind of help." The slap comes again, harder this time. The maid's head snaps to the side. She tastes blood where her teeth have cut the inside of her cheek. She straightens slowly, wipes her mouth with the back of her hand, and returns to folding the laundry. The wife is breathing hard now, her careful control unraveling. "You will tell me the truth, or you will face the consequences. Legal consequences. I will have you investigated. I will have you charged. There are laws about this sort of thing. Fraud, extortion, defamation. I will make sure you never work in this city again." The maid finishes folding a pillowcase, places it precisely on the stack, and looks at the wife with something that might be pity. "Then do what you must," she says. That night, the wife delivers her final ultimatum. She calls the maid into the dining room, where she sits at the head of the long table like a judge pronouncing sentence. The husband is there too, relegated to the far end, his face turned toward the window. "I've been more than patient with you," the wife begins. "I've given you every opportunity to make this right. But you seem determined to destroy yourself." The maid stands with her hands folded in front of her swollen belly, her uniform straining at the seams. She is 6 months pregnant now. There is no hiding it anymore. "So here is what will happen. You will confess to having an affair with someone, anyone, outside this household. You will sign a statement to that effect. And then you will leave, with a small severance and a letter of reference that says nothing about your condition." The wife slides a piece of paper across the table. It is already typed, already prepared. All it needs is a signature. "Or," the wife continues, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you can refuse, and I will make sure that you leave with nothing. No reference, no severance, no future. I will see to it personally that no one in this city will hire you. You will be destitute, homeless, raising your bastard child in the gutter where you belong. The silence that follows is absolute. Even the house itself seems to hold its breath. The maid looks at the paper. She looks at the wife's face, hard and certain. She looks at the husband, who has finally turned from the window, but whose eyes cannot meet hers. She thinks of her child, of the life she wants to give her, of safety and shelter and something better than this. But she also thinks of the truth, of what it means to live with lies, of what she would be teaching her daughter if she signed her name to someone else's story. No, she says. The word is quiet, but it fills the room. The wife's face goes white, then red. She stands so abruptly her chair crashes backward. Then you will leave this house, tonight, now. I want you gone within the hour. The husband makes a small sound, almost a protest, but it dies in his throat. The maid nods once. She turns and walks toward the servants' quarters to gather her few belongings. As she leaves, she hears the wife's voice, shaking with rage and something else, something that might be fear. You're making a terrible mistake. The maid doesn't turn around. Perhaps, she says, but it's mine to make. The street is dark and cold when she steps out of the servants' entrance for the last time. She carries a single bag containing everything she owns: 3 changes of clothes, a photo of her mother, the wooden cross the husband had touched. It is not much, but it is hers. She has $60 in her pocket and no plan beyond making it through the night. But she has something else, too. Something the people in that glass house have spent their whole lives trying to buy, but have never possessed. She has her integrity intact. The city swallows her into its anonymous darkness. Behind her, the mansion glows like a jewel box, beautiful and empty and full of secrets that are already beginning to rot. She does not look back. The shelter smells of disinfectant and boiled vegetables and the particular desperation of people who have run out of options. The maid is given a cot in a room she shares with 11 other women, each one carrying her own story of how she came to be here. No one asks questions. That is the unspoken rule of places like this. Privacy is the only luxury they can afford each other. During the day, she searches for work, but her swollen belly is a mark of disqualification. Shop owners take one look and shake their heads. Come back after the baby, they say, as if time is something she can afford to waste, as if her child will not need to eat from the moment she is born. At night, she lies on the thin mattress and feels the baby kick. Strong kicks, insistent, as if the child is already fighting to be known. The doctor at the free clinic had remarked on it during her last visit. "This one has spirit," he'd said, pressing his stethoscope to her belly. "Heart rate strong and steady. You're lucky." Lucky. The word had seemed obscene in that moment, but she understood what he meant. Despite everything, the stress, the fear, the inadequate nutrition, the baby was thriving. As if she had already decided that the circumstances of her conception would not define the force of her existence. The due date is still 3 months away, but the maid has learned not to plan too far ahead. She takes each day as it comes, grateful for the shelter, the thin soup they serve at dinner, the small kindnesses of strangers who have nothing, but still find something to share. She does not think about the house on the hill. She does not think about the husband's face, or the wife's cruelty, or the warm room she once slept in. To think about those things is to give them power over her present, and she cannot afford that kind of weakness. But sometimes, late at night, when the other women are sleeping, she allows herself to wonder, what are they doing now? Are they sleeping peacefully, their secret buried with her departure? Or are they lying awake, haunted by what they have done? She will never know that in the mansion, the husband cannot sleep at all. He walks the empty rooms at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. Pacing the marble floors she used to scrub, he finds himself standing outside the small room where she slept, his hand on the doorknob, unable to turn it. Inside, her absence is a presence. The stripped bed, the empty closet, the faint scent of the cheap soap she used. He had found the wooden cross in her room that day, weeks ago, and he had held it in his hands like a talisman. He had wanted to believe it meant something, that she was pious, forgiving, that her silence was a kind of grace extended to him. But now he understands. Her silence was not for him. It was despite him. His hands shake when he pours his morning coffee. He forgets appointments. His business partners remark on his distraction, his pallor, the way he seems to be somewhere else even when he's standing right in front of them. The wife notices, of course. She notices everything. "You look terrible," she says to him one morning, her voice sharp with irritation. "Pull yourself together. People are starting to talk." He wants to laugh at that. People are starting to talk. As if the talking is the problem. As if the reality beneath the talk is something that can be managed with better posture and a fresh shave. But he says nothing. He has become fluent in the language of nothing, the grammar of absence. He dresses for work. He kisses his wife's cheek. He drives his expensive car down the hill toward the office where he will shuffle papers and sign documents and pretend that his life is not collapsing from the inside out. The wife, meanwhile, has begun her own investigation. She is methodical about it, strategic. She reviews the household accounts, looking for irregularities. She questions the gardener, the driver, anyone who might have had access to the maid. She constructs timelines, maps patterns, searches for proof of the affair she is certain must have occurred. Because it must have been an affair. It must have been someone from outside their world, someone beneath them, someone who took advantage of the maid's loneliness and naivety. The alternative is unthinkable. But the timelines trouble her. The maid had rarely left the house. Her days off were infrequent and accounted for. The gardener is 70 years old and happily married. The driver is gay. The delivery men come and go too quickly for any kind of relationship to have formed. The wife sits at her desk, surrounded by notes and receipts and calendar pages, and feels the first cold touch of doubt. She pushes it away. Doubt is weakness. Doubt is the crack through which chaos enters. She picks up the phone and calls her lawyer. "I need you to arrange something for me," she says. Discreetly. The paternity test is her idea, though she frames it as closure, as a way to definitively rule out any connection to the household, to protect the family name from any future accusations. The lawyer is skeptical. Why pursue this if the maid is already gone? But the wife insists. "I need to know," she says. And that, at least, is true. Finding the maid takes 3 days. A private investigator tracks her to the shelter, confirms she is still in the city, still pregnant. When the wife receives the report, she studies the address with distaste. The neighborhood is poor, dangerous. That the maid has fallen so far should satisfy her, but instead it makes her uneasy. The letter arrives at the shelter on a Friday afternoon. Official letterhead, legal language, a demand cloaked in bureaucratic courtesy. The maid is required to submit to a paternity test. Failure to comply will result in legal action. The maid reads the letter 3 times, her hands trembling. She understands what this is. The wife's last attempt to create a narrative, to build a case. If the test shows the father is some unknown man, the wife will have her proof, her vindication. if the test shows something else. But it won't, because the husband will never agree to submit his own sample. He will claim ignorance, offense, let his lawyers tie the whole thing up in knots until it becomes too expensive and too complicated to pursue. Except the maid has underestimated the wife's determination. When the lawyer's letter arrives at the mansion, demanding the husband's sample, he reads it with the dawning horror of a man watching his own execution being prepared. "This is insane," he says to his wife. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." "But why? She's gone. It's over. Why drag this up?" The wife looks at him with eyes like surgical instruments. "Because I need to know the truth." "The truth?" His voice cracks. "The truth is she had an affair. She got pregnant. She refused to name the father because she's ashamed. That's the truth." "Then the test will prove it." He is trapped. To refuse is to confirm guilt. To comply is to risk everything. He stands in the middle of their bedroom. This man who has built his life on certainty and control, and feels the ground dissolving beneath his feet. "Fine," he says finally. "Fine. Order the test." He tells himself he will find a way out. He will bribe the lab technician, falsify the results, create some bureaucratic complication that derails the whole thing. But deep down, he knows, the truth has its own gravity. It has been pulling them all toward this moment since the night he walked into the maid's room and convinced himself that power was the same as permission. The test is scheduled for Monday morning. The maid arrives at the clinic alone, her belly huge now, her face drawn but determined. She signs the consent forms. She allows them to swab the inside of her cheek. She answers their questions with quiet dignity. Across town, the husband sits in a different clinic, staring at the same consent form. His hand hovers over the paper. He could still walk out. He could still refuse. But his wife is watching. And some part of him, some terrible, self-destructive part, wants this to be over, wants the secret to stop eating him from the inside out. He signs. The results will take 7 to 10 business days. The maid goes into labor on day 6. It happens in the middle of the night, a sudden sharp pain that wakes her from restless sleep. She lies on her cot, breathing through the contractions, timing them with the discipline of someone who has learned to endure without complaint. When they are 5 minutes apart, one of the other women helps her to the emergency room. The staff there are brisk, efficient, accustomed to women who arrive alone and afraid. They check her vitals, confirm she is in active labor, wheel her into a delivery room that smells of bleach and fear and the iron tang of blood. The pain is extraordinary. It rewrites her understanding of what the body can endure. But through it all, she stays focused on a single thought. Soon she will meet her daughter. Soon she will hold the child she has protected with silence and sacrifice. Soon she will know that it was all worth it. The baby comes at dawn, as the first light is breaking over the city. She is small but healthy, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that open immediately, alert and searching. The nurse places her on the maid's chest, and the world contracts to just the two of them. The baby's skin against hers, the tiny, perfect fingers, the rosebud mouth. "What will you name her?" the nurse asks. The maid has been thinking about this for months. She wants a name that means something, a name that carries hope. "Verity," she says. Her name is Verity. "Truth." The nurse smiles and writes it on the chart. But even in this moment of profound joy, the maid sees what others will see. The baby's features are already distinct, already recognizable. The shape of her nose, the set of her eyes, the particular curve of her upper lip. She looks like her father. Anyone who knows him will see it. Anyone who looks closely will know. The truth, it seems, has written itself on her daughter's face. That same morning, the envelope arrives at the mansion. It sits on the hall table, unremarkable among the other mail. Just a standard manila envelope with a return address from the genetics laboratory. The wife finds it when she comes downstairs for breakfast. She holds it for a long moment, feeling the weight of it. Inside this envelope is confirmation of everything she already knows. Inside is vindication, proof, the weapon she will use to ensure that this ugly chapter is closed forever. She takes it into the sunroom, the same room where she first confronted the maid, and sits in the chair where she delivered her ultimatums and her threats. The morning light streams through the windows, turning everything translucent. She opens the envelope carefully, methodically, as she does everything. Inside are 3 pages: clinical language, percentages, genetic markers. She skips past the technical jargon, her eyes searching for the conclusion. And there it is, in black and white. Numbers that cannot be argued with, science that cannot be denied. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Below that, the names. Alleged father, her husband's full legal name. The pages slip from her hands. They flutter to the floor like broken wings, settling around her feet. For a long moment, she cannot breathe, cannot think, cannot do anything but stare at the space where the papers had been, as if by looking away she can unmake what she has just read. But the truth does not unmake itself. The truth sits in that sunroom with her, patient and implacable, waiting for her to catch up to what it has always known. Her husband, who has slept beside her for 15 years. Her husband, who has built a life with her, a home, a carefully curated image of success and respectability. Her husband, who stood silent while she tormented a pregnant woman, who let her believe lies, who let her destroy an innocent person rather than claim his own guilt. The sound that comes from her throat is not quite human. It is the sound of something breaking that cannot be repaired. She is still sitting there, surrounded by scattered papers, when the husband comes home. He sees the envelope on the table. He sees the papers on the floor. He sees his wife's face, and he knows. "It's you," she whispers. And with those 2 words, the house of glass begins to shatter. The husband does not deny it. He cannot. The evidence is too absolute, too clinical in its certainty. Instead, he sinks into a chair across from her, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume, a disguise that no longer fits. "How long?" Her voice is barely audible. He opens his mouth, closes it. His hands are shaking. "It was one night. Only once. I swear to you, it was..." "How long have you known?" The distinction matters. The lie by omission is somehow worse than the act itself. He has watched her rage against the maid, has listened to her threats and ultimatums, has stood silent while she dismantled another woman's life. And he has known. All along, he has known. "Since the beginning," he whispers. The wife laughs. It is a terrible sound, jagged and broken. "Since the beginning. You've known since the beginning, and you let me..." she cannot finish. The full scope of his betrayal is too large to fit into words. He has not only been unfaithful, he has made her the instrument of his cruelty. He has turned her into the villain in a story where she thought she was protecting her home, her marriage, her dignity. "I was afraid," he says, and his voice cracks. "I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I just stayed quiet, if I just let it pass, maybe it would—" "Maybe it would what?" Her voice is rising now, sharp and cutting. "Disappear? Resolve itself? Did you think the baby would just stop existing because you refused to acknowledge it?" He has no answer. There is no answer that could possibly suffice. The wife stands abruptly. She walks to the windows, looks out at the manicured gardens, the pristine pool, the view of the city spreading below them. Everything she has worked for, everything she has built, all of it stained now, compromised, revealed as the fragile construction it always was. "There's a child," she says. "You have a child." "I know." "A daughter." He looks up sharply. "How do you—" The report includes basic information: date of birth, gender. She turns to face him, and there are tears on her cheeks now, though her voice remains steady. "She was born yesterday. 6 pounds, 4 ounces. Healthy." The husband puts his face in his hands. His shoulders shake with silent sobs that seem less like grief than like the physical expression of terror. He is a man watching his entire life collapse, his reputation crumble, his carefully maintained facade crack apart. The wife feels something strange moving through her. It is not forgiveness. She will never forgive this. But it is a kind of clarity. She has been living in a story she did not write, acting out a part in a play she did not know she was performing. The maid knew the truth. The husband knew the truth. Only she, the wife, has been stumbling around in ignorance, making a fool of herself while everyone else watched. "Where is she?" the wife asks. "Who?" "The maid. Where is she?" The husband looks up, confused. "I don't know. You're the one who threw her out." The wife feels another wave of nausea. She has not just thrown out a pregnant servant. She has thrown out the mother of her husband's child. She has cast into the streets a woman who was carrying— what? Her husband's illegitimate daughter? Her own husband's secret family? The language fails. There are no words in her vocabulary for this situation, because she has never imagined she would need them. "I'm going to find her," the wife says. "Why? What good would that—" "Because I need to know." Her voice is fierce now, determined. "I need to look her in the face and understand how she could stay silent, how she could let me torture her rather than speak the truth." The husband makes a sound that might be protest, but the wife is already moving, already gathering her phone, her keys, her purse. She is a woman possessed by the need to understand, to make sense of the senselessness that has invaded her perfectly ordered life. She finds the address in the private investigator's report, still sitting on her desk where she left it weeks ago. The shelter is 40 minutes away, in a part of the city she has never visited, never had reason to visit. The building is gray and institutional, marked by a small sign that reads, "Haven House Women's Shelter." She parks her luxury car on the street. It looks obscene here, too bright and too expensive, and walks through the front door like a woman entering a foreign country. The woman at the front desk eyes her with immediate suspicion. Wealthy people do not come to places like this unless they are looking to exploit or to judge. "I'm looking for someone," the wife says. "A woman who was staying here. She just had a baby. The desk attendant's expression hardens. We don't give out information about our residents. Please, I just need to know where she went. It's important. I'm sure it is. The woman's voice is thick with sarcasm. But unless you're family or law enforcement, I can't help you. The wife feels frustration rising in her chest. She wants to explain, to make this woman understand. But how can she possibly articulate the complexity of what has brought her here? She worked for me, the wife says finally. She was my employee, and I need to speak with her. The desk attendant's eyes narrow. Are you the one who fired her? While she was pregnant? The wife feels her face flush with shame. Even this stranger, this woman who has never met her before, can see the cruelty of what she has done. Yes, she admits.
But I didn't know. I didn't understand.
You didn't understand that firing a pregnant woman with nowhere to go was wrong? The wife has no defense. She stands there in her designer clothes, in this dim institutional lobby that smells of industrial cleaner and human desperation, and feels the full weight of her own monstrousness. She's not here anymore, the desk attendant says finally, her voice slightly softer. She went into labor 2 days ago. As far as I know, she's still at County General. The wife's hands are shaking as she gets back in her car. County General. The public hospital. The place where people go when they have no insurance, no money, no options. Her husband's daughter was born there. Her husband's child came into the world in the cheapest, most overwhelmed hospital in the city because the woman carrying her had been stripped of everything else. The maternity ward is crowded and understaffed. The wife walks through hallways that smell of antiseptic and exhaustion, past rooms where women labor and cry and bring forth life in conditions that seem designed to emphasize their powerlessness. She finds the maid in a semi-private room, separated from another new mother by only a thin curtain. The maid is sitting up in bed, the baby in her arms, and she is singing. Softly, in Spanish, a lullaby the wife does not recognize, but can feel the tenderness of. The wife stands in the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak. She has rehearsed this moment in her mind during the drive over, has planned what she will say, how she will demand answers. But now, seeing the maid with the child, with her husband's child, all her prepared speeches dissolve. The maid looks up and sees her. For a moment, neither woman speaks. Then, slowly, the maid shifts the baby so the wife can see her face. The resemblance is unmistakable. The baby has her father's nose, his chin, the same shape to her eyes. She is marked by her paternity as clearly as if it were written on her forehead. Her name is Verity, the maid says quietly. The wife's legs feel weak. She grasps the doorframe for support. Why didn't you tell me? The words come out as a whisper. Why didn't you tell me it was him? The maid looks down at the baby, strokes her impossibly small hand with one finger. Because I was afraid of what you would do to her. Not to me. I could survive anything you did to me. But her, the maid's voice catches. She didn't choose any of this. She didn't deserve to be born into a war. The wife feels tears streaming down her face. So you let me punish you instead. I let you reveal yourself, the maid says, and there is no cruelty in her voice. Only a kind of sad clarity. I gave you every opportunity to choose kindness, to choose mercy, to believe that a woman in my position might be telling the truth, or at least deserved dignity regardless. But you chose cruelty. Every time. You chose cruelty. The words land like blows. The wife wants to defend herself, to explain that she didn't know, that everything would have been different if she had known the truth. But would it? Would she have treated the maid better if she'd known the baby was her husband's? Or would she have just directed her rage more efficiently? I'm sorry, the wife whispers. The maid looks at her for a long moment. I believe you are. But sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry doesn't give me back the months you stole from me. Sorry doesn't erase the fear you made me live with every single day. What do you want? The wife asks. Money? I can give you money. I can help you. I don't want anything from you. The finality in the maid's voice is absolute. She has drawn a line, and the wife understands she will not be permitted to cross it. Not with money, not with apologies, not with any of the tools she has always used to smooth over discomfort and buy her way out of consequence. But she's his daughter, the wife says, gesturing helplessly toward the baby. He has responsibilities, legal responsibilities. She has rights. She has the only right that matters, the maid says firmly. The right to grow up away from people who see her as a problem to be managed. The right to be loved without conditions. The right to exist without apologizing for it. So what? You'll just raise her alone? Struggle on your own? Pretend her father doesn't exist? The maid's eyes flash. I won't pretend anything. When she's old enough, I'll tell her the truth, all of it. But I will not tie her to people who have already proven they value their reputation more than they value human decency. The wife feels as if she is falling, as if the floor has opened up beneath her and she is tumbling through space. Every certainty she has built her life on is crumbling. She is the wronged wife. She is the victim of betrayal. But she is also the oppressor, the torturer, the woman who wielded her power like a weapon against someone who had none. Both things are true, and she does not know how to hold them both in her mind at once. I need to go, the maid says. Visiting hours are ending and I need to feed her. It is a dismissal, gentle but firm. The wife nods, numb. She turns to leave, then stops. Why Verity? She asks. The maid smiles, sad and knowing. Because the truth is the only thing that sets us free, even when it destroys everything else. The wife walks out of the hospital in a daze. The evening air is cool, the city lights beginning to flicker on across the valley. Somewhere in the building behind her, her husband's daughter is sleeping, unaware that she has already changed the lives of everyone around her simply by existing. The wife gets in her car but doesn't start the engine. She sits in the parking lot, her hands on the wheel, and allows herself to truly comprehend what has happened. Her marriage is over. It ended the moment her husband walked into the maid's room, though neither of them knew it yet. Everything since then has been theater, performance. The slow-motion collapse of a structure that was already fatally compromised. But more than that, she has been complicit. Not in the affair, that was all his doing, but in the cruelty that followed. She chose at every turn to believe the worst. She chose to wield her power without mercy. She chose to see the maid not as a person, but as a threat, a problem, an inconvenience to be eliminated. And the maid, who had every reason to destroy them, had chosen silence instead. Not to protect them, but to protect her child. The wife finally understands what she has witnessed. An act of moral courage so profound that it makes her own choices look like what they are. Small, petty, afraid. She starts the car and drives home through streets that suddenly seem unfamiliar, as if the city itself has rearranged while she wasn't paying attention. When she arrives at the glass house on the hill, her husband is waiting. He looks like he hasn't moved from where she left him, still crumpled in the chair, still dissolved in self-pity. "Did you find her?" he asks. The wife looks at him, really looks at him, and sees a stranger. This man she married, this man she built a life with, is a coward. Not because he had an affair. People make mistakes, people fail. But because when faced with the consequences of his actions, he chose to hide behind her. He let her be the villain. He watched her torture an innocent woman and said nothing. "Yes," she says, "I found her." "And?" "And she wants nothing from us. Nothing from you. She's going to raise your daughter alone." "My daughter." He says the words like he's testing their shape, seeing how they feel in his mouth. "What does she look like?" The wife feels a surge of rage so intense it makes her vision blur. "You don't get to ask that. You don't get to know. You gave up that right when you let me destroy her mother." "I didn't." "Yes, you did." Her voice is ice. "You stood there. You watched. You said nothing. And now you want to know about your daughter? Now you want to claim some kind of connection?" He opens his mouth, but she cuts him off. "I want you out of this house. Tonight. Tomorrow I'm calling my lawyer. The divorce will be ugly and public, and you will lose everything. Your reputation, your business partnerships, your standing in this community. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are." "You can't." "I can, and I will. Because unlike you, I'm willing to face the consequences of my choices, even the ones that destroy me." She walks past him, up the stairs, to the bedroom they have shared for 15 years. She begins pulling his clothes from the closet, throwing them onto the bed in an angry heap. He follows her, pleading now. "Please, we can work this out. We can get counseling. We can—" "There is no we," she says. "There hasn't been a we since the moment you walked into that woman's room and decided your desires mattered more than her safety, more than our marriage, more than basic human decency." She throws a suitcase at him. "Pack. Now." He does, his hands shaking, his face wet with tears that she no longer has any sympathy for. She watches him stuff expensive shirts and designer suits into luggage, and she feels nothing. The love she once felt for him has been incinerated by the heat of his betrayal, leaving behind only ash and anger. When he's finished, he stands in the doorway, looking back at her one last time. "I'm sorry," he says. "I know," she replies. But sorry doesn't change anything. Sorry is just the sound cowards make when they finally get caught. He leaves. She hears the front door close, hears his car start, hears the sound of the engine fading as he drives away from the house they built together. Then she sits on the bed, surrounded by the evidence of his hasty departure, and allows herself to fall apart. She cries for hours, for her marriage, for her dignity, for the woman she thought she was, and the woman she has discovered herself to be. For the maid who suffered because of choices the wife made. For the baby who will grow up knowing her father was a coward and her mother was a warrior. And when the tears finally stop, when the sun begins to rise over the city and light fills the glass house once again, the wife makes a decision. She cannot undo what she has done. She cannot give back the months of fear and humiliation she inflicted. But she can choose differently going forward. She can face the truth, no matter how ugly. She can stop hiding behind money and power and carefully constructed narratives. She picks up her phone and calls her lawyer. "I need you to draw up some papers," she says. "A trust fund for a child." The lawyer is confused. "You don't have children." "No," the wife says, but my husband does." The scandal breaks 3 days later. The wife does not try to contain it. She does not hire publicists or crisis managers or lawyers skilled in the art of spin. Instead, she tells the truth. To her friends, to her business associates, to anyone who asks. Her husband had an affair with their housekeeper. He got her pregnant. They both allowed the woman to be cast out rather than claim responsibility. The reaction is swift and merciless. In a city that runs on reputation and carefully maintained appearances, the husband becomes radioactive. His business partners distance themselves. His club memberships are quietly revoked. Invitations stop arriving. Phone calls go unreturned. He rents an apartment across town, a modest place that feels like a prison after the glass mansion. He drinks too much. He sleeps too little. He exists in a kind of limbo, waiting for consequences that never seem to finish arriving. But the wife discovers something unexpected. The truth, once spoken, has its own power. Women she barely knew begin to reach out to her. They share their own stories of husbands who strayed, of help that was exploited, of power that was abused. They thank her for her honesty, for refusing to participate in the conspiracy of silence that protects men like her husband. She is not redeemed by this. She knows she does not deserve redemption. But she is changed. The trust fund she establishes is substantial, enough to pay for the child's education, for medical care, for housing. She structures it so the maid has complete control, no strings attached, no conditions. The lawyer delivers the papers personally, along with a letter the wife has written and rewritten a dozen times. The maid reads the letter in the small apartment she has managed to rent with money from the shelter's emergency fund. It is only 2 rooms, but it has a window that gets morning light, and that is enough. Verity is sleeping in a bassinet beside her, making the small snuffling sounds that newborns make. The letter is not an apology exactly. The wife is too honest for that now. Instead, it is an acknowledgement of harm done, of power misused, of choices that cannot be unmade but can be learned from. "I cannot give you back what I took," the wife has written. "I cannot undo the fear, the humiliation, the months of suffering. But I can ensure that your daughter has opportunities that her circumstances might otherwise deny her. This is not charity. This is restitution. It is what she is owed by virtue of who her father is, regardless of whether he is willing to claim her." The maid reads the letter 3 times. Then she looks at the trust fund documents, at the numbers that represent more money than she has earned in her entire life. She could refuse it. Part of her wants to. Accepting it feels like being bought, like agreeing that money can somehow balance the scales of what was done to her. But then she looks at Verity, at her sleeping daughter, and she understands. This is not about her pride. This is about giving her child every advantage she can. This is about taking what is owed and transforming it into something good. She signs the papers. The weeks turn into months. The maid, though she no longer thinks of herself that way, finds work doing bookkeeping for a small business whose owner doesn't ask questions about the gap in her employment history. She arranges childcare through a neighbor, a grandmother who loves babies and charges almost nothing. She builds a life that is modest, but hers. Verity grows. She is an easy baby, quick to smile, curious about everything. The maid watches her daughter's face, looking for traces of the father, and finds them less troubling than she expected. Verity is not her father's sin. She is her own person, already distinct, already herself. Sometimes, late at night when she is feeding the baby, the maid allows herself to think about the husband. She wonders if he thinks about his daughter, if he wonders what she looks like, whether she is healthy, what kind of person she might become. She wonders if guilt keeps him awake, or if he has found a way to seal off that part of his life and move forward unburdened. She will never know. She has made sure of that. She has built walls around herself and her daughter, walls made not of glass, but of distance and deliberate separation. He is not welcome in their lives. He has not earned the right to know his own child. But she also knows that someday, Verity will ask. Children always ask. And when that day comes, the maid will tell her daughter the truth. All of it. The good and the terrible, and everything in between. She will tell her about the house made of glass, and the people who lived there, and the silence that both protected and imprisoned. She will tell her about the choice she made, to endure rather than expose, to suffer rather than destroy. And she will tell her daughter that she was loved. From the very beginning, before she was even born, she was loved with a fierceness that could withstand cruelty and fear and the crushing weight of powerlessness. That love, the maid believes, is the only inheritance that truly matters. The wife sells the glass house. She cannot live there anymore. Every room is haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories of who she used to be. The woman who valued appearances over ethics, who wielded power without wisdom, who could look at a pregnant woman and see only a threat to her carefully constructed world. She moves to a smaller place, a condominium that is elegant but unpretentious. She begins volunteering at the women's shelter where the maid once stayed, teaching resume workshops and job interview skills. The work is humbling. The women there do not care about her designer clothes or her expensive education. They care only about whether she can help them, whether she can be trusted. She has to earn their trust, day by day, hour by hour. It is harder than anything she has ever done. One afternoon, months after everything fell apart, she is leaving the shelter when she sees a familiar figure on the street. The maid is pushing a stroller, walking with the purposeful stride of someone who knows exactly where she is going. The wife freezes. She wants to call out, to approach, to say, "What?" There is nothing left to say. The trust fund has been established. The divorce has been finalized. The public reckoning has already occurred. But then the maid stops at the crosswalk, and while she is waiting for the light to change, she bends down to adjust the baby's blanket. The gesture is so tender, so unconsciously loving, that the wife feels tears spring to her eyes. The light changes. The maid crosses the street and continues down the block, never looking back, never knowing she was observed. The wife stands there long after she has disappeared from view, thinking about the different paths their lives have taken. The maid, who lost everything but gained her dignity. The wife, who had everything but lost herself. Which one of them, she wonders, is truly free? She does not have an answer. Perhaps there is no answer. Perhaps some questions are meant to be lived with rather than solved. She walks back to her car slowly, feeling the weight of all she has learned. That power without accountability is just another form of violence. That silence can be both weapon and shield. That the truth, when it finally emerges, does not care about convenience or comfort or carefully constructed lies. The truth simply is, and we must all learn to live with it. The husband remarries eventually. A younger woman, someone who knows nothing of his past, or claims not to. They have a child together, a son, and he pours into this new family all the attention he denied his daughter. He tells himself this is different, that he has learned from his mistakes, that he is a better man now. But late at night, when his new wife is sleeping and his son is tucked safely in his crib, he sometimes finds himself thinking about the other child, the daughter he has never met. He wonders if she looks like him, if she has his laugh, if she will grow up hating him or simply not knowing he exists. He tells himself he did what he had to do, that acknowledging her would have destroyed too many lives, that his silence was a kind of protection. But he knows, in the deepest part of himself, that these are lies. Lies he tells to make himself feel better about a choice that had nothing to do with protection and everything to do with cowardice. He will carry this knowledge with him for the rest of his life. It will color every moment of joy with his legitimate son, every milestone, every achievement, because he will always know there is another child, a daughter who exists in the world, growing and changing and becoming, and he has chosen to know nothing about her. This is his punishment. Not public shame, that faded with time. Not financial loss, he rebuilt his business under a new name, but the quiet, persistent knowledge that he failed the most basic test of character, and that failure has a face and a name, and a life he will never be part of. Some nights, it is almost unbearable. But he bears it anyway. Because what choice does he have? The years pass. Verity grows into a bright, serious child. She asks about her father when she is 5, and the maid tells her a version of the truth that a 5-year-old can understand. Your father was not ready to be a father. He was afraid, and he made bad choices. But you are not his bad choice. You are my great gift. Verity seems to accept this. She does not ask again for a long time. The maid, who has long since stopped thinking of herself by that label and has reclaimed her name, Rosa, builds a life that is stable and good. She advances in her work. She saves money. She creates a home that is warm and full of laughter and completely, utterly hers. Sometimes she thinks about the wife, wonders how she is doing, whether she ever found peace with what happened. She sees her occasionally, from a distance, at community events or in the grocery store. They do not speak. There is nothing left to say. But there is also no hatred. Rosa has released that burden. Hatred, she has learned, is a weight that only punishes the person carrying it. She has chosen to put it down. The wife, for her part, has reinvented herself entirely. She has become an advocate for domestic workers' rights, using her wealth and connections to push for legislation protecting the vulnerable. Some people call her a hypocrite. She does not argue with them. Perhaps she is. But perhaps hypocrisy that leads to good outcomes is better than consistency that perpetuates harm. She never remarries. She tells people she prefers her independence, and this is true. But it is also true that she cannot imagine trusting someone that way again, cannot imagine building a life with another person when the last one revealed so spectacularly how little she understood about the person sleeping beside her. She is lonely sometimes, but she has learned to sit with loneliness, to accept it as the natural consequence of choices made and unmade. On Verity's 10th birthday, Rosa takes her daughter to the park. They spread a blanket on the grass and eat cake from a bakery box, and Verity talks excitedly about school and her friends and a book she is reading about scientists who changed the world. "Mama," she says suddenly, in the way children have of asking profound questions in the middle of mundane moments, "do you think my father ever thinks about me?" Rosa considers the question carefully. She has promised her daughter honesty, always, no matter how difficult. I think he probably does, she says finally. But thinking about someone and being brave enough to know them are very different things. Verity is quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she leans against her mother's shoulder. I'm glad I have you, she says simply. Rosa wraps her arm around her daughter and holds her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body. This child, born from violence and silence and the worst kind of betrayal, has become the best thing in her life. Not despite the circumstances of her conception, but in defiant opposition to them. Verity is proof that goodness can emerge from terrible situations, that love can transform pain, that the sins of the father and of all the adults who failed in that moment do not have to define the child. I'm glad I have you too, Rosa whispers. So glad. They sit together in the park as the afternoon light turns golden, as other families pack up their picnics and head home, as the world continues its relentless turning. Mother and daughter, survivors both, carrying forward the truth of what happened and the hope of what might still be. And in that moment, Rosa realizes she has won. Not in the way victory is usually measured, with money or status or public vindication, but in the way that truly matters. She has kept her dignity. She has protected her child. She has built a life that is authentic and true, free from the lies that once surrounded her. The glass house is gone, sold to strangers who know nothing of its history. The people who lived there have scattered, carrying their wounds and their lessons into separate futures. The husband lives with his guilt. The wife lives with her regret. And Rosa lives with her daughter, with her hard-won peace, with the knowledge that silence was not weakness, but the strongest thing she ever did. The story could have ended differently, probably should have by the cold logic of power and money and who gets to write the narratives. But Verity exists, and her existence has rewritten everything. She is 10 years old, bright and curious and loved. She does not yet know the full story of how she came to be, of the cruelty that marked her beginning and the courage that ensured her survival. But someday she will. And when she does, Rosa will make sure she understands. You are not a mistake. You are not a secret. You are not the shame they wanted you to be. You are proof that goodness persists, even in the darkest places. You are proof that love can be stronger than fear. You are proof that the truth, no matter how long it takes to emerge, will always, eventually, set us free. Verity finishes her cake and runs off to play on the swings, her laughter carrying across the park like music. Rosa watches her, this miracle child, this unexpected gift, and feels something settle in her chest. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of meaning. She has given her daughter something no one could ever take away, the knowledge that she is loved completely, unconditionally, without reservation or regret. And that, Rosa thinks as she gathers up the picnic blanket and calls her daughter back to her side, is the only victory that was ever worth fighting for. The sun sets over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Somewhere across town, in separate homes, the husband and the wife are living their separate lives, carrying their separate burdens. But here in the park, as Rosa takes Verity's hand and they walk together toward home, there is only light, only love, only the simple, profound truth of a mother and daughter who survived the worst the world could throw at them and came out the other side intact. The glass house has fallen. The powerful have been humbled. The silent have spoken. And the child who was never supposed to exist is running ahead on the sidewalk, turning back every few steps to make sure her mother is following, her face bright with the unself-conscious joy of someone who knows, bone deep and certain, that she is cherished. This is how the story ends, not with revenge or retribution, not with dramatic confrontations or legal victories, but with the quiet, revolutionary act of a woman and her daughter choosing each other, day after day, year after year, choosing love over bitterness, truth over lies, dignity over power. And in choosing these things, they have changed the world. Not the whole world, perhaps, but their world. And sometimes, that is enough. The streetlights flicker on as they walk home through the gathering dusk. Rosa holds her daughter's hand and feels the weight of everything that brought them to this moment. The pain and the fear and the impossible choices. And she feels something else, too. Gratitude. For this child. For this life. For the strength she didn't know she had until she needed it. For the truth that set them free.